Welcome back to the Butler Beat. I'm Shelby Seibring. Investigative reporter for the Clarion-Ledger, Jerry Mitchell, recently visited campus to deliver the Butler University College of Communications annual Howard Straat Lecture. His investigative reporting work to uncover evidence against people connected with some notorious killings from the civil rights era has laid the groundwork for many new trials. Thank you so much for joining us today. So can you tell us a little bit more about your job and what you do on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I'm an investigative reporter for the Clarion-Ledger. I try to work on investigations, and of course the investigations people kind of know me for are the ones that have to do with the civil rights slayings that have gotten reopened and reprosecuted. And I continue to work on what's sometimes called the Mississippi burning case, which is the 3 civil rights workers who were killed by Klansmen in 1964, and there are 2 suspects that are still alive in that case.
Okay, and so what inspired you to do your investigative work?
I saw the movie Mississippi Burning, and I saw it with 2 FBI agents who investigated the case, as well as a journalist who covered that case. And so that kind of, I would say, is the beginning of my education. I was horrified to find out there were more than 20 guys involved in that killing, and nobody had ever been tried for murder. And so that was kind of the beginning of my journey.
So that's what specifically got you involved with the civil rights
Yes,
and
it
stuff?
did. Yes,
Okay.
it did. Hard to believe. A Hollywood movie, but it is true. Yeah.
How long have you been working at the Clarion-Ledger?
I started working at the Clarion-Ledger in 1986, so
Okay.
I've been working at the paper since then.
And what did you do before that?
I worked at various journalism jobs. The one previous to that, I'd worked at the Hot Springs, Arkansas newspaper for about 3 years.
Okay. Did you get involved in any other investigative reporting before you went to the Clarion-Ledger?
Yeah, I actually was kind of the investigative reporter at the Hot Springs paper.
Okay.
I investigated this kind of failed theme park. There was some kind of corruption connected with it, and began reporting on it. And so I've always, I read, early in my reporting career, I read All the President's Men. And when I read that, I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to be Woodward and Bernstein. I want to be an investigative reporter. And so,
That's awesome.
yeah.
How do you gather the information about the people that you have investigated?
Well, one of the first things you do, if you're talking about like a murder case, is you try to gather all the documents connected to that case. Like, let's say that the police, local police investigated the case. So you'd want to go get the local police file on that particular case. And you'd want to, if say the Highway Patrol, maybe they looked into it too. You can see what the Highway Patrol had, or the FBI in a lot of these cases was very much involved. So you try to get all those files and assemble them. And you kind of start to get an idea of what the case as a whole was like, who potential witnesses were. If there's a transcript, that's even more valuable. You see what the actual testimony was, try and track down those people. What are they saying now? I mean, sometimes people in the 60s may have been intimidated, or maybe they didn't want to talk at all. So, but you still try to contact them because maybe they're willing to tell more than they were willing to say at the time because of fear of retribution or whatever.
So do you actually go and talk to the witnesses?
Yes.
You contact them and everything?
Yeah.
Okay. So now I know that the Ku Klux Klan member Byron De La Beckwith
Yep.
has been tried twice for the assassination of NAACP member Medgar Evers.
Correct.
And you laid the groundwork for a new trial which led to a life sentence for him in 1994.
Correct.
How long did it take you to gather all this information about him?
Well, the initial story that I did had to do with this defunct state agency that was called the Mississippi Sovereignty Commission. It was like a state segregationist spy agency that operated, kind of a clandestine organization that operated from the 1950s until the early 1970s. And the Mississippi legislature decided to seal all those documents. They didn't want any of those documents being public, so they sealed them all for 50 years. And my first thought as a cynical reporter when I found that out was, what's in there?
Yeah.
You know, what's in there? And so I really wanted those files. And so I began to develop sources who had access to those particular files and began to gradually leak me those files. And what they show is at the same time the state of Mississippi was prosecuting Byron D. Beckwith for the killing of Medgar Evers, this other arm of the state, the Sovereignty Commission, was secretly assisting the defense trying to get Beckwith acquitted, and nobody knew that. And that story ran October 1st of 1989.
So then did you sit in on the trial and everything?
Oh, yeah, I covered everything.
Okay.
I mean, I covered everything the whole way. You know, I covered the
Oh
trial
my
and everything
gosh.
else.
So how many people have gone to jail from the cases you have reopened?
4.
Okay. And can you tell us a little bit about those?
Sure, sure. I also worked on the Vernon Damer case, and Vernon Damer he and his family, if you can imagine this, were attacked in the middle of the night, 2 o'clock in the morning, Klansmen firebombed their house,
Oh my God.
began firing their guns into the house, and he woke up, grabbed his shotgun, ran to the front of the house, began firing back at the Klansmen so his family could escape safely out a back window. Unfortunately, the flames of the fire seared his lungs,
Yeah.
and so he died.
Wow.
And so he was involved in the civil rights movement. And so after Beckwith got indicted, his family, Damer family, met with me and wanted to do something about that case. So I wrote about it, and not too long after that they met with authorities. Authorities agreed to reopen the case. It looked like something might happen from that standpoint at that point, but the district attorney got cold feet over time. And then, as a matter I'd almost given up on the case. I was literally, in 1997, I'm in grad school at Ohio State, and I get a phone call. This mystery guy won't give me his name, but wants to talk with me, wants to tell me something in person. So I flew back to Mississippi and met with him, and there were also 2 sons of Vernon Damer that were with me, Vernon Jr. and Dennis. And I think everybody had a gun except me. I had my pen though. So yeah, and so this guy, Bob Stringer was his name, he had overheard Sam Bowers give the orders to kill Vernon Damer. And so as a result of that, after he met with us, he met with authorities, and authorities reopened the case.
Have you done other cases besides this?
Yeah.
Go ahead, tell some more.
I worked on the Birmingham church bombing case. This happened in 1963. This is where the church was being used for civil rights activities and marches, and so they bombed the church one Sunday morning, and these 4 little girls were killed. They were just getting ready for church. In fact, the name of the lesson was "The Love That Forgives," and those 4 girls were killed. Another girl was blinded.
So do people come up to you and say, hey, like, we want you to cover this case? Like, how do you get your hands on all
That
this work?
case was kind of accidental. I got interested in that case because the suspect, one of the last living suspects, Bobby Cherry, wanted to talk to me. So I was like, okay, sure. And so I went over to talk to him. He insisted he didn't have anything to do with the church bombing. You know, said he was watching wrestling that night on television, he told me.
Mm.
And one of the things that they tell you in journalism, and this is the way we say it in the South, is even if your mama tells you she loves you, check it out.
Yeah.
So I did, and it turned out there wasn't any wrestling on television that night for him to watch. In fact, there hadn't been wrestling on for years. And so he ended up getting arrested in that case and convicted.
So did you go talk to him after that too?
Actually, I did,
Okay.
and I'm a believer in that. I'm a believer in talking to people as much as possible. I mean, if there's a suspect in the case, go talk to him.
Yeah.
You know, if you find out more information, go talk to him again. And like when I found out about the fact that there wasn't any wrestling on TV, he like was cussing and saying, "Yeah, there was wrestling on." You know, it was kind of funny, to be honest. Anyway, but yeah, he insisted. He still stuck to his story. He insisted the wrestling was on.
Oh my gosh. So have you dealt with the families whose relatives were killed?
Oh yeah,
A
and that's
lot.
been the real pleasure of mine, is getting to know these families, the ones
Yeah.
that were whose loved ones were killed.
What are their reactions about you working like towards?
Oh, well, they've been very kind. They're very kind. In fact, when I got the John Chancellor Award at Columbia in 2005, all the families came. And so it was a wonderful evening. You know, I had all the family members from these families came and supported me, basically.
Yeah.
And they were there. And so I've got a photograph of that I keep. You know, it's nice to have a nice reminder.
Oh my gosh. So has there been, like, I know that you've done a lot of these different cases, has there been a lot of criticism towards your
Yes.
work?
Yes.
There's always good and the bad. So.
Yeah. Well, I've had my share of criticism. One guy wrote a letter to the editor. My favorite one that got written to the letter to the editor was that I should be tarred, feathered, and run out of the state of Mississippi. That's what one. And of course, I've had threats too. I mean, that's.
So how do you deal with this?
I think I had to make a decision early on. You know, I sensed that I was going to get threats and continue to get threats, and I do even to today. And so it's just a matter of, are you willing to live fearlessly? And that's really what it's all about. I mean, it's really been a gift. I know it sounds strange, but I really have had to learn. It's not, living fearlessly is not living without fear. It's living beyond fear. And I think that's the key for all of us.
So how exactly, what would you say is the most rewarding part of your job?
Well, getting to see these families get justice after all these years has been tremendously rewarding.
Okay. And in 2009, you received a Genius Grant from the MacArthur Foundation.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about this prestigious award?
Well, the thing that's wild about it is you don't apply for it. They just call you up and tell you whether you've won. And so I literally got a call from the guy, the president of the MacArthur Foundation, and said, well, first thing he said was, he called me and said, "Are you alone?" I said, "No, I'm in the newsroom." And so he said, "Well, I want to talk to you alone." I said, "Okay." And I was trying to think how he could talk to me alone. I was like, "Well, call my cell phone." So he called me on the cell phone and called back, and he was like, "Do you know why I'm calling you?" I'm like, "A big check?"
Oh gosh. So what kind of advice would you give for Butler students who were trying to pursue a similar career path?
Well, I think one of the most important characteristics for reporters of any age is persistence. And I think when I first got into the business, I was going to do a story and everybody's eyes were going to be opened, and suddenly everyone sees the error of their ways or realizes what's going on, they're going to do something about it. And I realized over time that doesn't happen that way. So what you have to do is be very dogged and keep pursuing a story, even when you have people calling you up and cussing you out and saying, I don't want you doing this story.
Oh gosh, well thank you so much for joining us
Shelby.
today. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm Shelby Seibring on the Butler Beat.